So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A policy does not appreciate this. A procedure does not allow this. Our values do not accept this. And I think that's not the purpose we stand for. Aren't these words sounding very common? Yes, these words are common. And we all use these words in the organization on a day to day basis. But there is a need to reflect on these words. And when you reflect on these words, you discover that there is an interesting interrelatedness which exists among these words. And there is a very distinct coherence which is there among these words. And interestingly, if the coherence among these words is compromised, and it generally happens because we do not see the situation or the reality in its totality, we look at it in a fragmented way and in a hustle and bustle of a day to day rigmarole, we miss on the coherence, okay? Now, let me explain what I mean by that. So, we have something called a policy in the organization, okay? Now, where does this policy come from? Now, what gives birth to the policy, okay? I think the policy is a representation of a particular principle or a particular value which the organization believes in, okay? So, for example, if we have a policy that, look, we will not recruit somebody who decided to leave us for a period of 2 years, okay? Now, the hidden meaning in this particular policy is that, look, we do not appreciate people leaving, and a talent is valued in this organization. And if somebody decides to move, we want to have a policy which communicates to the people that, look, staying with the organization does make a sense to the individuals and the organization. So this is the value which is getting depicted by this policy. So there are multiple policies which we have in the organization, but then each policy cannot stand in isolation. The policy has to have a principle backing it up, okay? If this principle is not understood, and if the relationship between the principle and the policy is being missed, there could be difficulty. Now, where does the principle emanates from, okay? So the principle emanates from what is called as the purpose, okay? So the policy is emanating from what is called as a principle, and principle is getting the life or getting the strength from what is called as the purpose. And purpose is something which is a reason of the existence of the organization. What is that which at the very core the organization wants to deliver, an organization wants to offer? So this purpose is also a very interesting subject. There is an interesting research which says that, the average age of the organization and the potential age of the organization, there is a huge difference. There are organizations which have been living for the last 300, 400, 500 years, while another research says that, look, the average life of the Fortune 500 companies is around 35 years. In 35 years' time, these organizations either get merged or something happens which makes them lose their identity, okay? So when this subject was studied further, that, look, how come the potential life is so high while the average life is low? So one of the point which figured out or which came out as a finding was that look, organizations which have a purpose, they live longer. So the clarity of the purpose is very fundamental to the longer existence of the organization. And hence, the clarity of the purpose will bring the clarity of the principle. The clarity of the principle will bring the clarity of the policy. The clarity of the policy will bring the clarity into the procedure. And all this will impact another P, which is called the people in the organization. So it all starts with the purpose, it comes down to principle, and look at the interesting piece. And I said that look, the another important aspect is that there has to be a coherence, okay? You can't have a purpose which is talking a different language and going in a different direction, and you have a principle which is going in a different direction. And if you have that situation, then your principle, your policy, your procedure, everything will get into a different direction. And that's what sometimes happens. And then you have a situation where your policies are creating dissatisfaction, your policies are doing something else, and your purpose is something else, your principle, your values are something else, while what is happening on the ground in the organization is very different. Hence, people who are there in the organization are going to get impacted. So look at the interesting relationship of all these P's around. That look, there is a need to have a clarity of purpose. And interestingly, there's another P which can be included in today's conversation, and that P is the profit. So there is a profit, there is a purpose, there is a policy, there is a principle, there is a process, there is a procedure. So many P's. Now, if you visualize that all these P's are small, small circles, and there's a big, and the inner core of the circle is the organization as such. And imagine if the rhythm, if the coherence among these gets into a problem, the organization would get into a problem. And I know I'm oversimplifying by using all these P's and saying that look, all these P's should be united and there should be a sort of tandem, and it's a big subject. But the point to reflect is that there is a need to have a relationship, and a relationship which adds to the wholeness of it, okay? So my purpose, my process, my principle, my policies, and this all will have an impact on profit, and this all will have an impact on people. So it's not only about creating a policy, but it's about creating a policy which is in line with the principle, okay? So policies are generally being created on and off, and they are being created to help people decide, which is fine, but the decision has to represent the principle which is behind the policy. So, ladies and gentlemen, if there is a policy issue, if there is a context with reference to the process, I think the whole chain needs to be understood, at least by the people who are at a leadership position, that look, what do I do? How do I do? Why do I do? And how does this all fit into the very basic purpose of my existence? And create a good, sensible music out of it, okay? So the unity in all these P's. So I have written an article on LinkedIn where I've stated that look, the U among the P's. So all these P's needs to have a unity. If that unity element is missing or compromised, I'm sure, ladies and gentlemen, that there could be a dissonance, or there could be a rhythm getting compromised. So these are simple words, sounds mundane: policy, procedure, principle, and but they're important, okay? Because All organizations run on these words, whether they are in administrative context, in an organizational context, or in technical context. Okay, so for that matter, when we talk about technical context, so you have a procedure, you have a process. Okay, so there is a process. Let's say homogenization is a process, and there's a procedure to do that process, and that process of homogenization has a principle built into it, and that principle would be something to do with the chemistry, something to do with some reaction, and that principle would also be coming out of something which is called purpose. Okay, in scientific things we do not get into something called purpose, but then I think purpose exists, whether it is technical or it is non-technical, administrative. I think in every context this flow of P is paramount. Oh, there's another P. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to me, and have a great day and have a wonderful evening. Bye bye.